she basically grilled them of, hey guys, it's a year later. You're talking about these silly AI features where now your clock on your home screen will go behind your main subject of your picture so that you can see the picture better. And we'll do this cringy, like the 3D picture thing that Facebook does that it seems like everybody I know over the age of like 65 posts everywhere. And it's just like, is that really what we're working on? Welcome to Engineer in the Loop, where we have hands-on conversations at the human-AI handoff, code, tools, and war stories for builders in the loop. This episode is brought to you by From Code to Clarity. Let's unlock clarity on what truly drives you beyond the keyboard. Join your fellow engineers of the Clarity Bites as we explore strategies to go from the code to find your clarity. During your free discovery chat with Clark, mention this podcast to get over 50% off your first session. Again, mention Engineer in the Loop for over 50% off your first paid session after your free discovery call. Let's get into the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the newly rebranded podcast, Engineer in the Loop, a weekly show for software engineers who ship with models in the mix. Brian, I think it'd be fun to have a episode for our mental health to complain about everything in tech that we just don't like right now. Because, man, we're recording this. I think WWDC for Apple happened on Monday. I am very underwhelmed as a stereotypical Apple fan. I know Derek Sharp will always give me crap if you guys join Meetup and our user groups of like not being on a real computer. I'm just so far in the Apple ecosystem at this point that it'd be hard to get out, and generally typically like their products, but man, I was so underwhelmed. The takeaways I saw were that basically their Apple Vision Pros now have really cool high-res like tiles, I think they call them. So like you can get a very realistic looking wall clock when you're wearing a $3,000 headset, which is cool, don't get me wrong, but I'm at the point where my computer is 10 years old and the choice is going to be, do I buy a brand new computer or do I buy an Apple Vision Pro? Like, it's 100% always going to be a new computer because the Vision Pro isn't a fully fledged computer. The iPad OS is getting more and more Surface-like, so Sweet. They now have windows and you can snap stuff and there's a mouse. So like, I think that's moving in the right direction. I would still argue they're years behind Microsoft in the Surface and other, all-in-one things. Mm-hmm. Spotlight is getting a little bit of AI and some love there with shortcuts and other short things. So you can like write messages now. You can do calls. You can do notes. I don't know about you. I use Spotlight on my Mac all the time. I don't think you use a Mac, but
nope.
It's one of my favorite Mac features of just like searching, previews, getting a little bit of a
Copilot.
Kind of. It's like Copilot before Copilot. It's like if the Windows search bar was actually good.
Copilot's good.
It is, but it's an extra thing. And the Spotlight's been around, I don't know, at least 10 years? I don't know how long Spotlight's been around, but it's a good tool. But the thing that really grinds my gears is the Wall Street Journal had an interview, and I'll put it in the podcast as well, with Craig, I'm going to blank on his name, the software chief, Craig Federighi, and the marketing head, Greg. And they basically grilled Apple. It's a short form part. They're putting a longer one out about, we've been being promised Apple Intelligence from what I would argue is one of the cornerstone AI companies, or was. Like, AI and Siri used to go hand in hand. If you were talking about assistance and intelligence, like everybody like Siri, Cortana, like they were all being used in kind of the same conversations. And she basically grilled them of, hey guys, it's a year later. You're talking about these silly AI features where now your clock on your home screen will go behind your main subject of your picture so that you can see the picture better. And we'll do this cringy, like the 3D picture thing that Facebook does that it seems like everybody I know over the age of like 65 posts everywhere. And it's just like, is that really what we're working on? Like,
I don't know.
And then his defense was basically they want it to work. They don't want it to just be a chatbot. That's fine. They don't want it to be, they haven't seen it live up to the quality of Apple. Everybody I've talked to about Siri, like one guy at my work said that one fun thing him and his son do is try to make Siri screw up, and they mess around and they just have fun because of how bad Siri is. So it's like, if we're talking about a quality product, Google has it figured out. Alexa has it figured out. Like, or Amazon. People are figuring it out. They're not perfect, but they're so much better than what we have today.
Well, I'm going to push back on that. I hate Gemini with the passion of a thousand burning suns. Oh my goodness.
Like as the assistant or just in general?
As the assistant. I hate it. So for example,
what's going on for you?
Okay, so all I want to do is, so I'm sitting at the piano and I'm thinking of songs that I want to play. And I think, I'd love to play Desperado by the Eagles. It's a very simple, straightforward song. It's got a simple 4-chord structure with a little twist maybe in it here and there. Very easy, but I don't remember what the chords are. I know it starts in G. I can kind of figure it out. I'm like, there's a couple chords in there I can't quite get. So I say, okay, Google, please give me the chord chart for Desperado by the Eagles. And it says, well, maybe I can make it.
A chord chart for Desperado by the Eagles, primarily in the key of G major.
Yeah, so it started going, actually. But what I want is the chord chart. Of course, today it worked. It actually gave me the chord chart. The other day, all it did was, we don't have the ability to give you the chord chart. Instead, here are the chords. G, G7, C, C minor 6, G, E minor, A7, D. Repeat, repeat, repeat. And then it's like, I said, I can't remember what you're saying. I need to see the chord chart. We don't have the ability to do that. I said, okay, well, open guitarchords.com and find me the link. We don't have the ability to do that. And I was so frustrated. I just was like, so then I just opened up Chrome and I just literally typed in Desperado chords. And 2 seconds later, I had the chord chart, the exact thing I was looking for on guitarchords.com or whatever the site is. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I was so mad. I was so mad. I wanted to throw my phone.
That's interesting that it happened to work now. You had the reverse demo curse.
Yeah.
Hey,
right?
Let me show you.
Well, actually, it was a failed demo because I didn't want it to work. I wanted it to say G minor 7.
Repeat.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
The other thing that really made me mad was their justification for it was also, well, people really like to browse the internet and search things. You don't see them asking Apple for that. You see people like to shop on Amazon. You don't see them asking Apple for that. And I'm like, no, you don't. But the other one was, people enjoy videos on the internet. You don't see Apple building that. Complete sleight of hand that Apple TV is a thing. It was a physical product. Now it's a subscription service that does do video. But it was the just lack of connection of, well, you guys told everybody this was coming out. That's why we all needed to upgrade iPhones, and it still hasn't been delivered. And here we are a year later from when you first announced this thing that was coming, and you're still we're still working on it. So people are upgrading their hardware. You basically sold somebody a promise, and now you're being called on your bluff because you didn't deliver. And it's well, it's hard. And then when you get pushed hard, it's well, people aren't asking us for these products. And it's yeah, but you didn't tell somebody to go buy a new $2,000 phone in order to enable this feature that you still have not delivered a year later. And instead you're doing some goofy shenanigans with making my pictures look 3D on my home screen. I understand tech, don't get me wrong. I understand it's difficult, but when your whole announcement was around intelligence and all these intelligent tools, and then you just don't deliver on...
What's an example of an intelligent tool that they maybe said they were going to give you that they haven't done yet?
Apple Intelligence for the desktop. I think they were going to make notes a lot more integrated with that and be smarter. Your search was supposed to be better and smarter. I think it was a couple months ago even before I saw the introduction of Apple Intelligence even rolling out on a Mac, my work Mac. It's just, there's nothing there. When I hit the Siri button, it's still Siri, right? It's not Apple Intelligence now. It's just, the assistant isn't there yet. When the defense is, well, it just hasn't quite cut the mustard yet. Well, don't tell people they need to go buy a new $2,000 phone to enable intelligence when you're not going to deliver it.
Yeah. I remember when Windows 8 first came out. Yes, I'm old. So if you aren't familiar with the progression at this time, we had Windows 95, then 98, then they had NT, which is based on 2000 technology, and then they had Windows XP for so the NT Windows or Win2K product or whatever it was all for the business users, and they had Windows XP for all of us on the desktop. And XP was a phenomenal operating system compared to what we experienced with 95 and 98. 98 was improvement over 95. XP was holy crap, they finally done it. And then they decided that they were going to redo Windows. And so you may have heard of Windows Vista, which was a god-awful failure for everybody involved. I don't even know what happened there, but it was bad. So then they came out with Windows 8. It's okay, now we got it. But they had this, at the time, XAML was starting to become a thing. So they had what appeared to be this unified vision of, hey, if we could just write everything in XAML, it'll work on the web and on our Windows 8 machine. And one of their major things they were touting was the Windows Store. And you could make a character on your phone, an avatar, And I was like, this is not important to me. So I feel like what you're experiencing now with Apple is, because Apple's always about 10 years behind Microsoft. What we experienced about 10 years ago with Microsoft. Actually, that was probably more like 15, 20 years ago. I'm kidding about that, by the way. I know I just pissed off half of Alec's followers because, Mac attacks, whatever.
I actually made this comment because somebody said that they bought a new iPhone because of the promise of Apple Intelligence. And I said, I actually believe it was, I think, Microsoft that burned me because it had a new... Instead of a launch title on one of the Xboxes, I think it was the one, they had a launch announcement for the newest Halo game. Okay. And then it kept getting delayed. And I'm like, guys, it's not a launch title anymore when you deliver it a year and a half, 2 years later. A launch announcement and a launch title are two different things. It needs to be live at launch to be a launch title.
Yeah.
And that was the last time I bought something prior to
So you bought an Xbox so you could play the latest Call of Duty and it didn't come out for a year and a half?
It was Halo, but yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Call of Duty's rinse and repeat now. There's a new one every year.
Yeah.
I think the Activision announcement was Call of Duty Black Ops 7.
I saw that.
I was listening to a podcast and I was like, I learned a few things today, such as there's already Black Ops, 3 through
3,
6.
4, 5, and 6.
Because it's so rinse and repeat at this point. I was just like, oh, I didn't realize. I have an Xbox One that I got I played the newest Call of Duty, whatever the one was before this. And it was probably the first Call of Duty I played, I don't know, in probably 5 years, 6 years. And it was fun, but it's somebody compared it to a subscription fee. So Activision, basically their subscription fee every year is that you have to buy the new Call of Duty to be with your friends and hang out. So it's the same way as you pay your WoW subscription or whatever.
Sure.
But I was like, that's interesting way to look at it, but especially if it's bundled into Game Pass.
Yeah.
It's I'm literally paying a subscription fee, which works better because then I get all these games plus it. But anyway, it's just a different take on a subscription model. If you release a new AAA title every year and you want to stay with your friends who have the latest games, you're going to get peer pressured into buying the newest one. And then rinse and repeat. But yeah, that was I still have the iPhone 14. The other thing, you brought up Vista. A lot of people are comparing the new UI design for the latest macOS to Vista.
Wow. Okay. Good luck with that.
They called it liquid glass is the idea. I've seen even memes that were how do you do the new macOS? And it shows CSS and it was just turn blur on 2%. It's now you're liquid glass. But a lot of people are doing callbacks of this feels very Vista-esque in the look and feel, because
about 15 years behind. That's about right for Apple.
I think objectively people said Vista was pretty. It just didn't work. They spent more time in the prettiness than the actual usability.
Part of it was just everything changed, and nobody likes change. But I noticed now that I'm twice as old as I was then, I'm I really don't like change now.
You said you had some complaints about Microsoft stuff.
Wow, what an awesome transition! It's almost like we scripted that.
Going.
I promise we didn't. But okay. So I have a couple things I want to rant about now. I've ranted about these things elsewhere, but this might be my first full public time ranting. Maybe I've even ranted on this podcast about it, but I'm going to label this as the dumbing down of C#.
Okay.
I don't really know any other way to label it. There is a movement that they seem to be doing with my favorite language of choice, C#, to, let's put it into the air quotes here, of make the barrier of entry less for other developers, right? Now, I understand the benefit of making the barrier of entry to a language lower and the attraction of other developers to try to get them into your ecosystem. I'm not going to argue with that strategy. I'm not going to say it's a bad strategy. What I'm very, very frustrated about is how over the last few years they have literally dumbed down C# to almost be Python. Now, let me put that with a caveat. It still works like C#, right? But not by default. You have to turn things back on or select buttons that are reverse worded. For example, do not use top-level statements. So you've never used C# before, and you go to Microsoft Learn and you start learning on their in-browser environment, which, by the way, VS Code in the browser is phenomenal. That's really cool that they showed that. That's really cool. I really appreciate when they do things like that. And code spaces, I know that's GitHub. It's kind of under the umbrella now. Also cool. And I understand that part of the structure kind of impedes scenarios like that. So, okay, I can see that. And especially Microsoft Learn or Hanselman's videos to teach you C#, you literally are only just typing the code that you need to know, which, okay, that's really great. And I actually had an argument. Well, this was maybe '08 to 010, '08 to 10, somewhere in there. It was in the early days of Twin Cities Code Camp for me. Early days for me, not early days for them. I think they had been going for a few years before that. But I was teaching entry-level programming at the time. I still teach entry-level programming. This is also why I'm so mad about the dumbing down of C#. But, that person taught in JavaScript on the browser. And I was like, how can you train entry-level developers without any structure? And he said, I see it the other way around, that they don't have to fight things to just be able to program. Now, that's a really interesting point. And C# now with top-level statements, using top-level statements, you can do that. But if I said I don't want top-level statements, I would think that means that I should have the full structure, right? If I say do not use top-level statements, that's when I get the full structure, right? So, right, if I use top-level statements, then I can't even talk about it because I'm dyslexic about it or something in my head. Like I can't remember. But when you create the project now with Visual Studio, there's a checkbox and it's unchecked by default, which automatically means I think that you are using top-level statements, and thereby you don't get the namespace statement. You don't get the program class. You don't get the main. You actually just can say literally in your console app, console.write, and that's the only line of code that gets generated in your file, in your program.cs, is console.write and then the output. Now, that's really great for learning. Okay.
Yes.
As my friend had said 12, 15 years ago, whatever that was, 18 years ago now, time is really going fast for me, so I apologize. But it is an easy way to learn. And if you're Python, it's a really easy way to say, well, this is very similar to Python. I love it. I'm going to switch to C#. But if you teach object-oriented development, like I do, on a regular basis, and your students struggle with things like including class libraries or adding methods to a class that doesn't show the class name, now you've got a statement up here that says console.write line, and then right below it you've got public int add, left paren num1 or num-a, comma num-b, right paren, your squigglies. You've got a literal method declaration underneath a top-level statement that's not inside squiggly braces. That's more confusing to an entry-level developer than having structure, in my personal opinion. I don't like it because I don't have a foundation to build on. It's like saying I'm going to build a house. Well, building a house is really hard. Why don't you just say, I would like to have a bathroom? Okay, well, I got a bathroom now, but I need a house that's not going to fall down as soon as I need to add the second story. So I know that everybody hates it when you use architecture of buildings and code as like a analogy, but it's so easy to do. If you plan your house well and you put a foundation around it, you can't put the bathroom outside the foundation. But if you just put a bathroom somewhere and then say, oh, by the way, I'd like to add a second story, you don't have a foundation to put it in. You have to redo the whole thing, or you have to understand why it's different now. So it's very hard for me. But the announcement that really got me, probably more aggravated than anything, is this new one that was released. It's in the .NET blogs. It was published May 28th. I wonder why. Our favorite time of year. Sorry. Anyway, probably in coordination with Build, which is, when things get released.
Microsoft's Christmas.
Right. That's why it's the most wonderful time. Anyway, I really can sing, by the way. But when I do things like that, it doesn't sound like I can sing. Funny story about that, but I won't tell it today. Anyway, there's a new thing called .NET Run app. Do you want to know how pissed off I am about running app.cs right now?
On a scale of 1 to 10, how many?
7, 8, 9, maybe 10. You know why? There's no more csproj. Oh, let's just throw it out.
I remember, because you had your program file, program.cs, and you used to have, what was the other one? System.cs? And then they moved it to one. I know people got really upset about that. And now getting rid of this. This is my first time seeing this. So it generates the csproj on the fly? Or this saying this is what it would be, but it doesn't do it.
So you can convert to a project-based app by running .NET project convert app.cs, and then it'll generate a csproj file. Neat, huh?
How does it run without the csproj then?
I don't know.
Okay, fair.
I don't know. Hanselman, he's way ahead of the game. So there's a link to a post here from him from 2018. But, and part of the problem is, I just want to say this. Like, I understand that, number one, I'm old. So, change is bad. But number two, I've never been the top, theoretical developer that can, see the future, like a Jimmy Bogard or, some of those other guys that can write libraries or come up with architectures that are going to be useful. they see it now, and 6, 7, 8 years from now, it's being adopted because it was a really good idea. So things like that, I've never been really good at. I'm really good at stuff that makes sense to me, and that I've seen and that I can do and that I can trust. So literally getting rid of the csproj file, if that's what's happening, maybe I'm wrong about that too, but it seems like there's no more csproj. We're just going to have this random app.cs file, kind of like, index.html with like app.main or whatever you do in Node or whatever you do.
There'll be just like a bunch of script tags in your index tag, and that's just going to automatically, like, you won't have npm to be like a package manager. You're like throwing out NuGet.
No, they still got it. I think NuGet's still a thing.
It just won't live in a csproj file for your dependencies?
It's going to be #:package and then the name of the package. So do you have the article still up?
Yeah, I can go back to that.
So maybe we're on a different one here. You're on a different page. You were on the actual MS Learn. I'm on the developer blog done by Damian Edwards.
This one?
Okay.
I pulled up Hanselman's page.
Yep. Okay. Sorry.
To show that in 2018 he was talking about this.
Yeah. Okay. So right there, it says new file level, then referencing NuGet packages right there in the middle of your screen right now. So you will just literally add a little bit. It's almost like it almost looks a little C++-X,
Yeah.
where you have like the make file and then you have the hashtag include and things like that. Okay, so maybe I can get on board with packaging NuGet stuff and not having to do all this stuff. But the one thing, this means that like now you're going to have to manage your version of NuGet directly in your code file.
I was just going to say, how does that work? Because then is it like every file you need to then re-reference it, or do they all get referenced from here as like your central CS? Like I don't understand how you build off of this. Like,
yeah.
So an analogy I have, when I was at Iowa State, we took the first real programming class you take. Like you take C, but it's like very basic. Like, can you do a for loop? Can you do a if statement? Like it's nothing crazy, right? It's all very basic intro. The first hardcore one you take is 227, which is intro to Java. First day of class, the professor goes, hey, the section public static void main. Don't worry what that is. You just need to know that's what runs your code. If you want to know what that is and why it's there, you'll learn in like a 400 level class. And it's like,
I just got like 400 pounds of stress off my shoulders by that statement. I'm like, yes, preach, brother.
So it was like, I could see from learning of like, you have these hand wavy professors in like a traditional education piece, right? Of like, hey, they're just giving you stupid problems to solve and then running some code against your method to see if it works. Yeah, get rid of all this crap because you don't need it. But I will say, as soon as you get thrown into an enterprise environment where they might be out of date, they're probably not running the latest and greatest stuff because they're just migrating as the times change instead of, doing a full rewrite. Are you almost doing a disservice to the people because you're training them on this new way to do stuff that no real professional organization is going to do? They'll get into an interview and then like start referencing, with hashtag or pound or whatever you want to call it, their NuGet's inline. And people are like, what are you doing? Like, that's not how you do that.
Right.
Like, are they going to struggle in interviews because they're trying to do the new greatest stuff, but other companies haven't caught up or kept up with it? So it's like, yeah, they might know to program now. They might understand the basics. They might understand all this, but are they going to understand it well enough to get a job? Because I also don't think, my own personal belief, I haven't worked with Java developers, so I can't say this, but the JavaScript folks tend to be more on the bleeding edge of things, mostly because libraries come up and die in like a month or two. But C# jobs and developers tend to be more like stable traditional companies where it's like, hey, we still have crap running on framework. Like, do you imagine teaching somebody with no using statements, no csproj, no nothing, and then dropping them into a .NET framework application where there's a program.cs, a system.cs, a csproj. They have to do some weird workarounds to even get this stupid thing to run because their dependencies are out of date. Like, there's all this extra complexity that like they have no grasp over now. And maybe that's the boomer part of me, like the hard knocks of like, hey, we had to figure this out. So like, it's not fair. Somebody else doesn't have to. But I also wonder if you're trying to, like, why are you trying to convert a Python developer? What is the real reason behind that? Python is great for data science because behind the scenes, it's actually C++ running all the actual calculations and stuff. It's just an interface. In the same way that, like, you don't care about garbage collection, some of that stuff for C#. Like, would a Python developer ever be happy doing a C# developer's job? In the same way, like, you even see this today with, like, there's people who just want to be exclusively on the front end because it just clicks better with them. They feel more creative there. Why are you optimizing a language for people And maybe it's to make an easier transition to the professional setting, right? Like you start learning some of the stuff. Maybe that's the use case here. But I've never understood trying to forcibly, and I'm speaking as somebody who doesn't really care what language I write, right? I do stuff in AWS. I do stuff in Azure. Heck, that's part of the reason why we changed the name of this podcast. You and I would say we're mostly mercenaries for hire. Like we'll teach you or do whatever you need help with. It doesn't, like I have my preferences, but if you tell me, hey, I want to do this in GCP, I'd be like, cool, let's go figure it out.
Right. Yeah, I prefer not to use Terraform, but if your organization is using Terraform, then we're going to use Terraform, right? I'm not going to argue with you on that.
You're not going to be like, hey, your billion-dollar enterprise is stupid for using Terraform. We need to use Pulumi or Bicep or like something that is now completely unmaintainable because nobody at the company other than you knows how to do that.
Terraform's completely unmaintainable by default, but
like other people might do that. That's not how you continue to build relationships with people or, you know, continue to have a good experience. And it's like, are you ever going to convince a C# developer to go do Java? Like if somebody told you, hey, we're making like those languages were so close at one point that there was lawsuits filed, but, or like, I don't know, Flutter or like what's stopping us from being like C# can now onboard everybody. But in the only real production scenarios, everybody's doing it this one particular way. What's the point of onboarding people to C# to just say, hey, that's cute, but like nobody does it that way in the real world? Because you have your additional pieces too of like the reason we use inheritance in C# so heavily is because it makes things more inherently testable. The concept of inheritance is going to be lost on people when they don't have the, you know, hey, we do the colon and then the base that it's extending because we're going to do it for testability reasons. Like, well, what is this boilerplate you're putting around my stuff anyway? Like, oh, that's a constructor.
And that's just it. So like now you've taken out the public static void main, right?
Yeah.
Because God forbid you have any structure at all, which is really great for a simple console app that doesn't have anything else in it.
Yes.
The second you need to use classes, the second you need to use any kind of inheritance, the second you need to do anything like any robust system would do, as you said, models that are used to load up entity framework that are used to do things in my ASP.NET MVC site or Blazor or whatever. I can't just be using top level statements everywhere. I've got to understand there's this hierarchy of namespace, classes. Classes go in the namespace. You can't go across namespaces, and that's so that we can both have something called add in a class called calculator, and yours is in your namespace and mine is in mine, and we can still both have them and nobody conflicts with anybody. Wow, it's super structured, super easy to understand if you explain it well, use it a couple times. Once you learn it, like you made the argument like you don't think it's fair that they need to learn it, maybe you're feeling like that's why you're fighting it. I would say that it's absolutely the other way around. It's not fair that we don't get to rely on the things we have learned, like being...
You see it as a way of losing tools we've already have and established to make it easier for other people to... I could see that.
Yeah, and let me just like put an asterisk on that. Like I understand tech changes, and I need to be able to adapt with tech as it changes, and I'm okay learning new things. What I'm not okay with is you deciding that you think there's a better way to bring other people into the ecosystem, so you're going to restructure everything, and yes, we will still make everything the way that it was still work, but you have to do some hoop jumping to get there. I'm in the process of writing my third edition of Practical Entity Framework. I've started it now. I love writing. I've decided, wow, I wish I could do this. If I could just write books all the time and actually make a career out of that, I think that's where I would be the absolute happiest, because I could do it on my schedule. I got in a zone. I barely ate, and I worked like 36 hours straight. Like I was like, this is amazing. I love what I'm doing. It was awesome. Like I had just this rare moment where everybody was gone. It was just me. I was like, whoa, I'm gonna let, maybe that's why I did what I did, because it's like I can finally get some work done. Anyway, in this edition, so in the previous editions I've always used Visual Studio as the main demo tool. I decided, you know what? I'm at a point now where yes, I like Visual Studio better than Visual Studio Code for my development work. But if you're on a Mac or a Linux box or even a newer developer who's been drug into this system, you're probably likely to be more prone or required by your architecture to use Visual Studio Code. So I've decided, okay, I surrender. If you can't beat them, join them. My demos are going to be done with Visual Studio Code for this book. Now that's going to add extra work for me, and it frustrates me a little bit, but I don't mind because, again, I'm okay learning new things. What I do mind is this. I had been writing and working, off and on. I think I took a few breaks here and there, watched a movie or whatever, but it had been all night long, and now it was 9 o'clock in the morning yesterday, and I'm just about done with this first chapter I was like, man, I am so close. All I've got to do is I'm building this project that's going to leverage a library, and it's going to have Entity Framework in it. And then it's going to use an app settings.json file for the connection string. Basic stuff. If I do this in Visual Studio, it takes me less than 5 minutes to create the entire solution, both projects, bring in the config builder, get the app settings.json, make sure that the app settings.json is a content, which is copied to the directory and can be seen from both. If I do it once in the program for the console, it could be leveraged in the program for the database context during migrations because they exist in the same output directory. Guess what happens when you do this in Visual Studio Code? Number one, you have to create the projects individually. Number two, you have to create a solution on top of the project. You have to associate the project to the solution. You have to associate the project references to the solution. Now, granted, Visual Studio Code has gotten better over the last few years of actually having a solution explorer, which can do some of that, but you still have to do a lot of manual CLI commands, which again, I think is the new ecosystem. I actually don't mind CLI commands once you know them, and I think knowing them is good. So I'm okay learning this stuff. But what got me so frustrated was in the process of writing this, the net inclusion of the app settings.json file in the console app that works like a charm in Visual Studio did not work when I was running the .NET tool to run migrations against the DB library that's in the same project in the same solution from within the CLI command. Apparently, this might be a known bug, but it basically doesn't inject the options for the DB config, didn't get injected correctly from the CLI. So it never picked up my app settings was being used from a different thing. So I don't know what I would have done without ChatGPT for this, to be honest. Like, I'm just going to say, like, when people say that AI can't code, they're 1000% wrong. AI is so much smarter than me. And it was able to give me multiple things to try. And finally, it found, I was trying to look it up here. I was trying to find the code, but it gave me a way to create an override on configuring with the DB context options builder. Instead of doing the not options builder.isConfigure that I'm used to doing, that's what I would have always done before that. It actually sent this command in. I'm trying to find it right now. I wish I had it handy. Not option builders.options.extensions of type SQL Server options extensions.any. I'm like, what in the heck is this? And it says the EF CLI passes in empty options but still works. It marks is configured as true. So they're going to force the detection of the broken state. As soon as I changed that one line of code to not use the not configured, but instead of the whatever this thing is that ChatGPT gave me, it worked like a charm. And it was like, and then I said, I was very frustrated in some certain words to ChatGPT, and it said, yes, I absolutely can. In fact, you are now officially the latest survivor of EF Core CLI Hell Level 6, the Phantom config. And I'm like, what the heck is this? And then it says, here's the TLDR of the actual bug. It calls the DB context, marks as configured true, skips on configuring, leaves you with a DB context that looks valid but explodes at runtime. The only fix is to manually inspect the options.extensions to detect the line. Now, let me just say this.
That's wild.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. If I had not been writing a book on the .NET Entity Framework and had not made the architectural decision at the start of writing this book to do my demonstrations in EF code to try to include the other people that Microsoft also wants to include, which are people on Macs, people on whatever, not just using Visual Studio, which is, quite frankly, much better tool, then I would have never learned this, right? So my anger is that I had to learn this, that I had to fight with this. But on the other side of it, now I know this. This is interesting. And if I ever run into this in the real world, I won't have to spend the hours of frustration during maybe a production bug to figure out. And I don't know that this would ever show up in production. Who's going to be running command line anyway? Nobody, right? You're going to be using actions. But maybe it'll show up in your GitHub Actions or something. I don't know. But wow, it was frustrating because I was tired and I had been working on this and it was like the last thing I needed to do so I could run some migrations. And every time I tried to run the add migration from the CLI, it would say connection string not initialized. So I was literally at the point where I was just going to copy the app settings file into the other project and just inject it in that way. But it's like, I'm like, no, if I don't have to do this in Visual Studio, I'm not going to do it in Visual Studio Code because it's wrong to have duplicate app settings.json files. That'd be terrible.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
Yeah.
So there's another rant for you.
Dude, and you bring up AI can code. Like, I was just working on a project the other day, and somebody was like, we were using Enums for Entity Framework because we have, 3 explicit values that wanted to go in. Well, we still want our enums in the back end, but the database, we actually want the string associated with it instead of the, an enums 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, blah. I was using Cursor, but same thing, Copilot AI agent, and said, hey, I want a type converter. And it showed me basically a t-value type converter that took in my custom object, or my custom object, so my enum, and it'll actually then do converting before it saves in to convert it from the enum to a string. It just created a little object helper method to do that, so that every time you get the object, it'll come back as a string, but convert back to the enum. And when it goes to save it, it does the same thing just in reverse, which was crazy to me. I was like, oh yeah, I can write some stupid logic, but I was like, oh no, hey, just do a value converter that takes in your enum and then, has the second parameter of a string. This was something I didn't even know the language did. I was like, oh yeah, we should do that, because somebody was like, the person watching our data was like, I don't want the enum in the database because I don't want to have to look and have a little sticky note that says 1 equals this, 2 equals this, yada yada.
Right.
So it's like, okay, I can do that. And then somebody was like, oh hey, look at the value converter. I was like, cool. And I just asked, and literally took in the object I had, took in the second parameter of string, was like, here's how you do it. Here's how you extend the base class of that to then do this conversion, and it's there and it's working. And even on my review, one of the guys reviewing it was like, this is a very elegant solution. And I was like, thanks. I just asked AI to do it for me.
So I don't know. I'm gonna push back. I don't know who told you not to put the numbers in there, but the whole reason of using it, why even use an enum then if you're just gonna hard code strings? Because what happens when red becomes red with an H?
Just in the use case we're using it, we are only having edits and creates and posts and all that into our database via a SQL editor. We're not going to give API access to edit it.
I see. So they're going to be using direct SQL queries.
Correct.
So now not having the number there makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Correct, because they're going to be reading the text out of the values and wanting to insert text values.
You're still going to have a problem if somebody ever misspells something, but at least you got a real valid reason to do that. Because I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah. It's a very odd use case, I know, but yeah, that's so that when the person is updating the data or just trying to read the data, they don't have to have a sticky note or something that says, what's number 1 again?
Just add it to your query. Just translate. When you do your select, just be like, oh yeah, this is this. Or when you do insert, this is this.
We could do that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still quicker to do checks for enums when you're just dealing with integers then, though.
Yeah, I just like to over-architect everything. Instead of doing it wrong, we're going to do it right and add complexity to everybody's life for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's probably not, it could be worse. It's not the worst solution in the world, but it's one of those do you deliver the value of the thing we're trying to build, that why we have that data in a database anyway, or do you just architect it to be maybe a hair safer, but we may never get to the point where somebody is not just using raw SQL to get in there and do stuff.
Yeah.
Because then you have the fun fact of all right, now if we can edit a database, that means we need auth roles and we need permissions and we need to figure out all that other stuff that goes along with that, because we don't want just anybody on the internet to be able to update our database. So that was our punt of somebody can connect directly with SQL. You can have firewall restrictions, all that sort of fun jazz. But then you don't have to deal with, how do I secure my API? How do I build a front end for all that? All this extra complexity and cost that comes with making maybe a more permanent solution, because we may never need that or get there because the guy running this, no SQL.
Vaporware. We have to create things because it could exist someday. And so you probably didn't use enough interfaces. You certainly didn't use enough security if you're not creating roles.
I mean, man, it's just delivering value overtakes that. So, but yeah, that's part of also being on a small ragtag team sometimes of,
right.
Hey,
Move
this
fast,
is a corner.
Ask questions later.
Yeah. I mean, the app, I think, helps deliver millions of dollars to our clients. So it's
if it's $1 million app, you got time to over-architect it.
I mean, you do, or do you just keep adding zeros to whatever money it's making, right?
I suppose.
The ROI is definitely there, but if you over-architect something that they never need or never want to use,
But what if they do?
Then they can ask for it, and then you can be like, this is what I'm building, and because you asked for it, instead of, hey, see that bag of money over there? We just burnt it because we thought you might want it one day. So, I don't know. It's just...
Can't AI just do it for you anyway?
It depends on what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
I'm rebuilding Engineer in the Loop. So, engineer in EITL.ai. Sorry, I had to spell it out in my own head. That domain is one I now own, and I'm working on a website for that, built in Astro. And I'm actually kind of blown away about how much AI is just doing it for me. I'm just describing what I want. So for example, like on the podcast page, it's hooked into our RSS feed. It'll give a preview and a little web player to just preview the first, 3 episodes that people can then click from that page and listen to. There's also a bunch of subscribe links, and then I'm using it to work my blog over there as well. And just on the homepage, it'll have like my latest blog post, our latest podcast episode, latest meetup, that kind of stuff. And it's super slick because I'm just like, hey, here's the RSS feed. Go pluck like the top 3. And it just like has a little JavaScript script that does that now. And I put in the engineering in the loop logo and was like, hey, here's the color scheme I want for this. And now my whole site is that color scheme. But yeah, I'll be sure to share it.
How did Astro?
Clark Sell and Daniel Ward at LT both plugged Astro.
Okay.
So if you're not familiar with Astro, it's is it astro.io? Did you pull it up?
Astro.build. The web framework for content-driven websites. Astro powers the world's fastest marketing sites, blogs, e-commerce websites, and more. Get started today. NPM create Astro at latest.
Yeah. So the one reason a lot of people like it is it has support for a lot of the JavaScript frameworks. But I think there's a line somewhere that says it has 0 JavaScript by default.
Okay.
So it should allow for quicker rendering because it's basically just a fancy markdown website, and it only brings in the JavaScript that you explicitly tell it that you want.
Can you host it on a static site then? But even if it's... never mind.
I think so. I guess I haven't hosted it anywhere. I'm just running it locally as of right now. So I will get back to you. But
well, I mean, an Angular front end or a React front end is all static. It's just that if you make calls somewhere else, that now we're talking you need something else. But if Astro is just static, that would make sense.
Well, and even with Angular, right? Like it's a static site and the JavaScript runs in your browser.
Right. Until you start making calls somewhere else and you need some backend that actually is hosting it.
Well, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But right now, like all my RSS feeds are public. So like a little JavaScript thing that says like, oh, here it is. Start a little web player. Like,
right.
I think it's good.
You're just
really
calling
cool.
an API. Can you tell me what an API is, Al?
Nope. According to Microsoft, I don't know what that is.
Oh no. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything.
Yeah. Well, that's a story for a different day. I'm still a little too spicy on that one. But yeah, so I will post the website once it's live and point people to it. But yeah, and then maybe we can walk through it on video or we can talk about it at some point. Do you have any last minute call outs or anything you want to drive traffic to, Brian? What are you up to?
I'm heads down on my book right now, so I'm probably going to create some videos around that. So I'll probably post links whenever they're done on my Twixter or maybe on LinkedIn.
Are we able to pre-order it, or are we too early in that process?
Oh no. We don't even have. It's supposed to be done. So it's going to be on EF Core 10, which is actually going to finally. I think we're going to be able to call it EF 10. I think we're going to get rid of core in any framework going forward, which makes sense. I talk about that in the first chapter a little bit because of the whole history of .NET and everything. But man, it is just so great that we'll be able to say EF 10 along with .NET 10. But that comes out in November, typically, unless something goes horribly wrong. It's already scheduled for release November something like 12th or something of 2025. You can look at the roadmaps and see the official date. At that point, I think at this point, it's just what features make it and what don't, right? If something has to get cut to the next version. But yeah, so the book should come out, hopefully it'll be done, written September-ish. We'll get an ISBN number October-ish and probably be able to pre-order at that point, right before November when everything drops. Yeah, so I don't like writing books in the summer, but I think this is actually going to be really fun because I haven't written a book for a few years, and this was like, oh man, I miss this.
Any conferences? You're coming to Nebraska Code in about a month, right?
Yeah, so actually I'm not doing a lot of conferences this summer, which is why part of the reason I'm able to do the book. But I was just like, I just have a lot of stuff going on, so it's just like, okay. So I'm only going to be in Nebraska in July, and I'll be at DevUp in... I think that was like the first week of August, somewhere in that range. I guess 8th, 9th, something like that.
I think Alex was giving me crap about not applying to like speak at it. And I was like, my wife's due that month, so that might not go over well. Yeah, I think it's August.
And I didn't get KCDC, which I'm not bitter. I only submitted 2 things to it, and they have such good content. It's hard to get in. So if you don't submit more than I really only submitted 1 session talk and 1 workshop. So the workshop is a crapshoot to begin with because that's a big deal, like 8 hours, a lot of stuff. And they can only do so many of those. And then one 1 hour submission, your odds of getting in are pretty low, honestly, because there's just a lot of really good quality at that conference. So I wasn't surprised that I didn't get selected, and I'm not upset about it at all, because if I really wanted to work hard at getting selected, I could have worked a little harder. But I actually was like, if they take me, great. If they don't, I'm taking a break from conferences this summer, which is an interesting thing. So hopefully next year I'll get in, though, because I don't like taking more than 1 year off. But yeah, but that'll be it. I think I'm going to do Azure Back to School and Cyber Back to School, probably the same talk, if he'll take them for both. I don't know if he will. And then that's going to go with the same talk I'm doing for Nebraska Code and for DevUp, which is on Azure App Security. So I'm actually writing a new cloud workshop for that as well, but that got put on hold the last couple weeks just because of all the other stuff. Yeah, so that's a lot of call outs.
Yeah, are you talking about data attributes at all?
And
Your security for Azure?
Negative.
I learned about that the hard way, playing with video translation service. I'll give a shout out to my latest blog post.
So you're talking about within Azure AI, the data attributes on your permissions?
Correct. Under like the Foundry object, you can specify specific data attributes. Or like AI Speech Studio, like you have your contributor, reader, yada, yada. But you can also do even more granular of data attributes. So like what can they do once they get into there?
Okay.
My use case was I want somebody to be able to use Video Translator, but nothing else in all of AI Studio or AI Foundry. And that's where I learned what data attributes were. So I've just been screaming it from the top of the hill because most people I talked to didn't even know those were a thing.
Right.
And I've called out as few examples, like with blob storage. I think that's a really easy one to see of like, hey, you could have access to blob storage, but there's particular actions on the data that you can't actually do. That seems like a more universal use case than the weird thing I'm doing with AI stuff. But that's just where it became a pain in my life. And I was like, what is this? And if you look at MS Learn, I believe they're listed as roles, if I remember right. Except when you try to assign it as a role, it blows up in your face. And then you just like keep digging, keep hitting your head at the wall. And it's like, oh, by the way, this might actually be a data attribute. And you're like, why does MS Learn call it a role then? It's not a role. It's something entirely different. There's a different JSON object to specify it, especially in Terraform, which is what I was using. Like there's a whole data attribute array that's not your role array. But yeah,
I know we're supposed to be ending the talk here, but so one thing you said was, Azure Storage. I agree with you. Azure Storage is, whenever I start training, I'm always like, let's start with Azure Storage. It's the easiest to understand, and it's the most universal. It's the best way to, like, I'm trying to learn something about permissions or whatever. Storage is just the thing that's the least in your way of trying to learn that stuff. So it's really cool. On that, I think what you're talking about is like I can have RBAC control as to like who can see the account, but I can also say I'm a blob storage data contributor, blob storage data reader. So I can only read blob storage or just write to it specifically, right? And it sounds like that's what you're doing with AI. My question then is it an actual role, or like you're saying it's some kind of data attribute, but is it like Foundry Vision Service Reader or something like that I can see in permissions within Azure Portal? Or is it something specifically just in Foundry and code?
It's even further down. I just shared you the link. So like for blob storage, it's a data action, not an attribute.
Okay.
Everything in C# is an attribute. So force of habit.
Well, for now, until they dumb it down. But anyway.
But yeah. So like I shared in the post, and it'll be in the podcast description. Like Microsoft storage account /storage account /blob services /containers /blob /read. That data action is what actually gives you the ability to read containers in blob. So if you put that as a not action, so if you gave somebody like contributor access and then put that as a not action, they will be a contributor but not able to read blob containers. That's what that means. So you can go super fine-grained. Go ahead.
How can I be a contributor and not be able to read?
Because I think the actions override the...
So I could upload and put a file out there, but I wouldn't be able to see it and prove it's there?
I think so.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
nuts.
Or the other way you could look at it is maybe you're a reader and maybe you have blob level edit access, but you don't have container level edit access. So maybe, Brian, you can see the folders and put files in it, but maybe you can't move them from file to file.
But you can copy them to the wrong folder.
You could put them into a different folder, and then maybe somebody can create a different folder on your behalf that says old, and you can put all the stuff in the old folder.
That never happens.
That's a callback. If anybody wants to know more about that, talk to us about Nebraska Code or at Nebraska Code. We'll tell you about that story.
Maybe.
Anyway,
I probably won't remember it by then. I'm old, remember? That's like a month and a half from now.
Yeah, somebody will bring it up, and if it's still rubbing you the wrong way, dude, you'll remember. It'll be like somebody just lit a match, and you'll be like, oh, I'm mad again.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be fixed by then. I won't have to worry about it. Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Like, oh, yeah, that was a really rough 2 days. That's what'll probably happen. Anyway, we'll talk to everybody again next week. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for coming, Brian.
Yep. See you later.
Bye, everybody.